All right, so in this last portion of the module, we're going to go over After Effects, which is part of the Creative Suite. To start a project, we're just going to go here to New Project. And just while we get started here, I would recommend right off the bat making a new folder for your assets. And we can go ahead and make a new composition. A couple things worth mentioning here are the background color. So at the moment it's set to black. You can change that to white or any other color if you like. I'm going to keep mine under black. These settings for our purposes are totally fine. The 1920 by 1080 is actually what Twinmotion renders out at. So you'll see that when we import those images. You'll see that the Lumion ones that we rendered out are lower quality. So we're going to actually have to scale them up to meet this aspect ratio. And then the only other thing that we're concerned with at the moment is the duration. And so you can see I have this set right now to 2 minutes. We're good with that, but just know that you can change this. You could add 0 and 30 here. So that would be 30 seconds. Or if you know you're making a 1.5-minute video, you can keep it at that. Whatever you prefer, maybe we can start with 1.5 minutes and we'll hit OK. And so the interface more or less is where the videos will get dropped in. You can kind of use the scroll wheel to scroll in and out. It's pretty good there. And then this is the timeline that we're going to work within here. So in terms of our assets, what we're going to want to do is I'll pull up my videos that I have rendered out using a bunch of different software using Lumion and Twinmotion. So you can see those here. And you'll see I also downloaded a royalty-free audio version here that we're going to use. So I'm just going to hold Shift, drag, and pull this into my assets folder. And so you can see the small preview here for the videos. So I have a couple Lumion ones that I've done. And then we also have a couple different examples here, like the day video and the exact same but at night that I recorded using Twinmotion. And so maybe a good starting point is to just show you how to drag and pull. And so like I mentioned, the aspect ratio for this is exactly 1:1 in terms of what we have set up. And so now you can see down here, we have our daytime video. If I use this, I can actually zoom in and out. So this is the full extent of the video. So that takes us to 1 minute and 30 seconds. I think, this is a good example. So I think I actually set this to 1 second, 1.3 seconds, let's say. So if I go to composition and edit composition settings, here, let me go 1 over. So if I go 130, okay. Let's take a look now. Okay, so that's better. I'm going to leave that in the video just because that's kind of helpful to see. So that also gives you a sense of how to edit this time. So if later on, you're adding your clips in and all of a sudden you realize you actually want a 2-minute video, you can go composition settings, switch this to 2. So that preset was a little strange. I added at 2 seconds before, which threw me off. But now you can see in this case, takes us all the way to 2 minutes. So I can zoom out just so you can see the full extent of that timeline. Okay, let me go back and I'll just do 30. Okay. There. So this is the first video clip I have. I'm just hitting spacebar to actually play the video. You may remember this from the Twinmotion demo. So it just kind of brings us down into this scene here. And I also have a nighttime version, which I can drag and pull over. This does kind of automatically snap to the center point, which is nice. These, if I want them to snap exactly end to end, you do have to hold Shift down and you'll sort of feel how that snaps into place. Otherwise, you're just eyeballing it. So just know to hold down Shift to snap that exactly aligned. So what that allows us to do if I hit space is there's a seamless transition. Otherwise, you may get something like that, like this moment of just the background. Now for this example here, though, what I'd like to do actually is maybe go from, a nighttime scene into a daytime scene and maybe back. So right now I have these 2 video clips over top of each other. Let me close out of this. Looks like I'm running low on memory. This is likely just because I'm recording as well. So hopefully that doesn't cause us too many problems. I won't do as many previews then. So here, transform. And so what we'd like to do is essentially have the opacity go from 100% at the beginning, say to 0, so that we can see underneath this image, which has another video playing, right? So you can hit that stopwatch here. So what that does is it sets our nighttime scene to 100. And then we can scrub forward. Let's say around here, I want it to be fully daytime. You can go ahead and change this opacity at this point to 0 and hit enter. And so now you can have a kind of nighttime that transitions into a daytime. Notice the vegetation we had set differently too, so it actually grows for us. And now we're down in this scene. And it could be that we're holding in place here and we actually want to transition back to night. So you can see the bird flying, maybe right before it moves. Let's have, or maybe right before the bird comes into the scene. Right there, let's say we want this to go back to 100%. Go ahead and do that. And so now, give this another look. Okay. So not bad there. So that's kind of one trick that you can do. Again, our transformation, if you want, you can just click up and the arrow there as well, just to get rid of that. So that edit is kind of embedded in there. So we have that as a kind of set scene. Now let's say we want to include some text. What we could do that might be interesting is here, once it goes to night, we may want to include some text. Let me go back and just look at our transitions. And this could be right after it goes to night, you know, so right around here. So what we can do is we can hold Control and Shift and D, and that's going to cut that scene for us exactly at that moment. Now, slightly different than Premiere Pro, it doesn't leave it on the same line. You actually get an additional scene. I'll hit space. And then let's say right before that transition. So we just want the text to appear just in that small moment. So Control Shift D. So I know just in this smaller window, I'm going to scrub over just to make it bigger. But within this frame here, we would like some text to appear, and maybe it follows the bird kind of out of frame. So let me go ahead and go to my text right here. I'm just going to go ahead and click, and I can start typing Gasworks Park. Your controls are over here in terms of actual text size and things like that. So if you want to highlight this and make it bigger, you can also change the fill. I think we're good with white because it's a night scene, but this is how you make it black. If you want to manually make this bigger or smaller, I'm just going to center this. But if you want to make it manually bigger or smaller, you can go over here to the selection tool and just click down and hold Shift, drag and pull. I'm just going to hit undo on that. Let me zoom out a little bit. So let's say we're happy with something like this. I'm going to scroll in a little bit. And so you can see now our text here shows up in red, Gasworks Park, and it's actually through the whole duration of our scene at the moment, right? So the way we can, well, with the exception of here, where the reason it's disappearing is because we actually have the nighttime clip over top, in case you're wondering why that happened. But we want it just to appear in this sequence that we've lined up for ourselves here. So let me go all the way over just to our end of clip, holding Shift to have that snap flush to this clip portion. Same thing here. So now when I hit space, it appears there. So like I mentioned, our hope is to actually have this text start to follow the bird and kind of get pushed out of scene before we transition away. So to do that, the way we would do that is we'll go over to where this scene starts. We'll make sure we're on scene 2, or layer 2 for that matter. Transform. And from here, what we actually want to do is change the position of that text itself. And so we can click here. And so this is our first position, which is where it currently is. Then we can kind of wait. And we want right around there for the bird to push it up. So let's go back a little bit. This will be our second position. And the reason we isolated this is we know at the end of this scene, the camera starts to make a turn. So we could start with that. Let's just see what that looks like. And so it starts to move a little bit before the bird gets there, right? So what we could do is start to move that over. Something like that. Maybe move it slightly over again. It's a little bit of trial and error until you're happy with it. That starts to feel pretty good. Now we may also want to have this start to disappear. So we could add opacity. We'll hit that stopwatch again. And then by the time we're up here, we do want that opacity as well to be at 0. So this would be one way to start to have this move and disappear with the bird. Let's go back once more. We can also still play around with the scale if we want. So let's see what that looks like. Let's go back. So that kind of makes it look like it's actually getting pushed out of frame. So let's just say we're happy with that. That's fine. Not stylistically perfect or anything quite like that. We'll go back down. The one thing I would want to make sure of is just that it's centered somewhat. And then you do need to also center it over here. Otherwise it'll push over. So just make sure you can click there. There we are. Let's give that a shot. So straight up and out. Okay. So those are two different scenes now that we've kind of blended together. So just holding shift to snap to the end of the scene in terms of where we're at. And I'm just going to toggle this to zoom out to see the full extent of our timeline. From here, we could start to add additional scenes. And so we have a bunch of different examples. Maybe I want to pull in some Lumion ones just so you can get a sense of what some of these look like as well. And so we have this scene. How does it end right now? So start orbiting to the side. There is fire in this one, so it may make sense for us to just pull over. We'll drag this, center that, and just snap it to the end. So what we can see here, pretty abrupt change, but we end up with a different scene also with fire. Now you'll notice, like I mentioned earlier, the aspect ratio, I rendered this out in Lumion for less high quality. And so a couple of things you can do, and what might be nice is, we have this Lumion logo. So we do have the option to just scale and hold shift to keep that proportional and zoom out slightly. So now we've essentially cropped out that portion. And we have just completely different scene. These don't make much sense together, but that's okay. Just to show you, give you a sense of the Lumion as well. One option we have here, if we find that some of the panning here was slower and here it feels too speedy, we can actually slow clips down. And so the way we would do that is we can just go to Layer, Time, enable Time Remapping. And similarly, you can see there's kind of two dots here. And so we can actually pull over, and the further apart these dots are, the slower now the scene is. Versus, this is the original speed. So we could also pull this in and it'll move quite quicker. So that would be our stalk distance. I'm just holding shift to pull that out. And you do kind of have to preview it just to get a good sense. But that's how you start to control that speed between two frames. Okay, not bad. So from there, one thing we could play around with as well is, let's go over here just to the end of our scene, and we can play around now with, certainly there's like additional clips and things. If you're curious, I could just add in even more, something like this, just to give you a sense of some of the other clips that I had made. Something more like an eerie pan through a bunch of different landscapes. And I'm adding just a couple more clips because the next thing we're going to talk through is how to stylize some of these. And so just like in, say, Photoshop, there is a stylize option down here, and these will be somewhat familiar likely to you. There are more general applications too. There's so many here. So if you want to desaturate or something, you can just start to type saturation and you get your hue and saturation the same way you would in Photoshop. So you can just take that, drag and pull. So you're applying that to this area to test one. And so you could start to desaturate your scene to make it, say, black and white. If you don't want that anymore, what I tend to do is just right click and cut. So that'll remove that from that scene. There are some other options to more heavily stylize things. And certainly if you're doing a mix of Twinmotion to Lumion, they do look dramatically different at the moment. You can start to edit these using stylize and start to play around with more dramatic forms of editing, such as posterize. So I could start to posterize both these scenes. Oh, let me hit undo on that. So I have this scene posterized. That's what this looks like now. And then let's go over here. And so this one's not, right? So we could do the same thing, posterize this. So that's just what those start to look like. So quite a lot heavier in terms of their edit. Again, I could hit undo and undo just on both those. And you can go through and, do something even like a threshold, which really does quite dramatically start to abstract the work. So something like this, and you can change that level. And let's see if this is at all legible. So kind of Sin City style scene or something like that. May work or not, depending on your aesthetic and what you're looking to go for. Same thing here. This will be a good one for us to see kind of like two different threshold options. It may be tough. Let's see, just with the fog and everything, this may be slightly difficult to register at all, but certainly the style starts to become very much the same between this image and say this one. So fairly abstract. Let me hit undo on both those once more. This as well. So for the purposes of this video, I may just do something like plastic, and I'll apply it to here. Just to give you one other example. So these are all going to be made plastic. I'm going to do the same with this scene. Just so we have a way different aesthetic for all these. Okay, so those are a couple different ways to start to apply different filters. Again, like I mentioned, there's a ton here to play around with. Those are just a couple examples of how to apply those. I'm just going to move these up so we can see the full extent of our layers over here. And then let's say I want to add one more thing. Let me go to Desktop, Assignment 5, and I'll add an image, this Gasworks one. If you're not seeing the defaults here, just go to this arrow thing and hit Project. And we'll go here, and we'll just drag this into our Assets folder as well. And so that's one image. So we're actually going to transition from this kind of eerie scene into an image that we made in a previous assignment. So I'm going to drag and pull. Same thing, you can see this image actually ends up extending the full scene. What I'm going to do is snap that to the end, and that gives us over 30 seconds to play with. Let's say we don't want to do that. We can cut this down and we can get maybe just roughly to around 1 minute. Yeah, I think that'll be a reasonable amount of time. So what we're going to do with this, I'm just going to drag on this a little bit just to zoom in a little more, and we'll make sure we're on that image. We'll make it quite a bit larger because what we're going to want to do is move through this scene up, down, and back. And it's just a way to, if you're not working purely with video footage and you like some of the renders you've done and want to include those but make them feel more dynamic, this would be one way to do it. And so again, we'll have this image, we'll go to transform, in this case position. So this is our first position, space. Maybe at the halfway point, we would like to be over here and slightly up like this. And then by here, we want to be just moving, or maybe by the end, we want to be scrolled all the way to the top like that. So let's see how that looks. Okay, it's a little fast, so why don't we pull this over a little bit. We'll drag this over, and then we can actually take these dots, right, and start to extend them. So let's take another look, because this is moving somewhat slowly. So now we have this panning across. A lot of the sequencing of these images and the speed at which they play is going to have a lot to do with your music. That feels a little slow to me. Let me go back. I said music, but it could be a bunch of different things you're adding. Like this film could be narrated. It could have just sound that you recorded on site or whatever else acoustically you're thinking of adding. So let's just do something like that. And I'm going to close on this scene for myself. So what I would recommend, that's my closer. It kind of goes up to this image. And so what I would like to do once it starts moving up, so from here to here, is I'm going to keep going with that opacity trick. So we're going to go from 100% opacity once we're at the top to 0. So essentially a fade to black. So we'll hit 0 here. So let's see how this plays. Okay. And so we can see up here, now I'm at 1 minute and 7 seconds. So I may just want to have this video end at 1:08. Something like that. Hit OK. So we have a bit of black there at the end. Additional text could be added or something like that. The only other thing we'll want to add in now is our music, which we have here. Again, I just recommend dragging and pulling on this. And so now we have the music here at the top, cutting across the full scene, beginning to end. And it plays us out with the black at the end still. So once you have your whole scene set up and you're happy with it, you could certainly play through this once more. But for the purposes of this demo, we can go ahead and just edit this out, right? So to do that, you'll go File, Export, and you're going to add this to the media encoder. So I'll give that a click. I'm not going to be able to actually export this with the recording on, it seems like, just based on the amount of compute that I have. So what I'll do is just show you how to set this up. And then once we have it ready to go, I'll export it and I'll just add the video at the end of this recording. So here we are for the media encoder. The output is going to a temporary file folder. We can go ahead and change that and have it go to our desktop. And the automatic default will be an MP4. This H.264 or 264 is great for what we need. So we don't need one of these original high quality images. This is totally fine for our purposes. And so from here, you would just hit the play button and that'll add it to our start queue like this. And so I'll let this go ahead and export and just hit pause on the recording. Okay, so that took about 2 or 3 minutes to export. So we can leave it at that, and I'll close this recording just with that exported video.